Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Currency of Ben Shahn's Public Art. My name is Mary Oken, and I am the Living New Deal, or L&D, Assistant Director. If you're new to L&D, we have been around for about 15 years, beginning as a research project in the Geography Department at UC Berkeley and growing into a nonprofit organization of national scope. Our mission is to document, map, teach, and advocate for New Deal history, primarily through our website, www.livingnewdeal.org. Our website shares the largest inventory of New Deal sites ever to be created, over 19,000 New Deal sites and counting, which is assembled through the generous support of private donors and with the help of ordinary people and researchers all across the country. I'm delighted to share tonight that this year and next, we're working on major upgrades to our website, thanks to generous donors who stepped in to help our organization recover the loss of our 2025 Digital Humanities Advancement Grant, awarded by the National Endowment for the Humanities and rescinded this March. Living New Deal's donors also support our public programming, such as tonight's webinar. Like our website, all webinars are free to the public, and you'll also find recordings of them on the webinar section of our website and on our YouTube channel. As the leader of L&D's Advocating for New Deal Art Initiative, or ANDA for short, it has been my great pleasure to meet with members of the New Deal Art Studies community over the last couple of years and to recruit leading scholars to serve as ANDA advisors, among them one of our speakers tonight, John Ott. Together with the ANDA Advisory Board and other collaborators, L&D is at the forefront of new contributions to the field of New Deal art studies, organizing webinars such as tonight's conversation, organizing conference sessions, and collaborating with editors and scholars on new publications, such as the New Deal themed special issue of Source Notes in the History of Art this spring, and a special colloquium section of Panorama, Journal of the Historians of American Art, which will be published next month, and feature essays by attendees of Forgotten Federal Art Legacies, PWAP to CETA, the first scholarly convening to consider the interconnections between New Deal public art projects of the 1930s and the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, or CETA, public art projects of the 1970s in San Francisco, which was co-hosted by the California College of the Arts this March. L&D also hosts other live events. If you live in Northern California, please consider getting tickets and attending Tunes from Our Backyard, a concert featuring New Deal music, which will be hosted at the Mill Valley, a historic site in Mill Valley on October 19th, 2025. And now for tonight's webinar. I am delighted to welcome two speakers in a conversation about Ben Shahn's work and the research, design, and ideas behind the Jewish Museum, in his exhibition on Nonconformity, a retrospective currently on view that examines social realist artist Ben Shahn and his lifelong commitment to social justice causes from the New Deal era through the height of the Vietnam War. This thematic and contextual presentation provides the rare opportunity to re-examine Shahn's responses to the most pressing social and political issues of his time and to recognize their contemporary relevance. This webinar will focus on the section of the exhibition entitled A New Deal for Art, which addresses the photographs, posters, and murals Shahn created for government agencies such as the Resettlement Administration and the Section of Fine Arts. How did Shahn navigate the demands of federal agencies, the needs of his own art and activism, the larger goals of his social criticism? The program will illuminate the current status of Shahn's New Deal murals in the context of the Trump administration's efforts to sell specific government buildings and its drastic staff cuts to the General Services Administration, the official steward that preserves public art in government buildings. John Ott, our first speaker, researches and teaches the art history of the United States with particular attention to artwork by and portrayals of African Americans, as well as art markets and collecting. Among his books are the forthcoming Mixed Media, The Visual Cultures of Racial Integration, 1931 to 1954, by the University of California Press, expected soon, and a new book project entitled Return to Sender, Race and Iconoclashes Over New Deal Murals, 1934 to Present. Our second speaker, Laura Katzman, is a professor of art history at James Madison University. In 2018-2019, she served as the Terra Foundation Visiting Professor of American Art at the Free University Berlin. A scholar of 20th century art and documentary photography in the continental United States and Puerto Rico, she is co-author of the award-winning Ben Shahn's New York, The Photography of Modern Times. Principal author of Reviewing Documentary, The Photographic Life of Louise Roscom, and editor of the Museum of the Old Colony, an art installation by Pablo Delano. She was the guest curator of Ben Shahn on Nonconformity, a retrospective hosted by the Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofía in Madrid, which she adapted for the Jewish Museum, New York in 2025. The accompanying book was published by Princeton University Press. John and Laura, welcome and take it away.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks everyone out there in Zoom land, all our fellow landers, Living New Deal, lenders. So yeah, and Laura, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this really exciting show. I'm not nearly the Shahn aficionado you are. You know, I work a smidge on the 30s, but I know enough to know that Shahn really was one of the luminaries of the, mid kind of 20th century. And changing artistic fashions meant that he's kind of been fading into the background a little bit. And so it's really fantastic to have a show that's the first, I think, retrospective in like 50 years. Yeah. It's also great for this particular organization because his work spans so many different New Deal programs. And so you'll get just a taste of what's in the show. I mean, we're just looking at one section today, which is going to focus on his New Deal work. There's stuff that covers other phases of his career, and even within the New Deal section, we're only going to get just a little hint of the stuff that's in the exhibition at the Jewish Museum. It's running until October 26th. Is that correct? It's been extended because of its favorable press reviews and enthusiasm. So let's just start and maybe talk about sort of what you were hoping to achieve with this exhibition, if I haven't given away sort of all the goodies.
No, that's great. Thank you, John. Should I share my my PowerPoint now? Okay. So can everybody see?
Not quite yet. There's the
Not
usual.
yet? Okay.
There we go.
Wait, I'm waiting.
And
waiting.
people watching at home, we seem to have a little technical issues. So there are some gray boxes that are blocking some of the imagery. We can't seem to get rid of them, and we'll do our best to work around them. So apologies for that.
Yeah, I apologize for that as well. But hopefully you'll get enough taste of the visuals that you'll pick up the gist of it. So yeah, so in terms of how the show originated and what we hope to achieve, as Mary said, the show was originated at the Museo Reina Sofía in Madrid. It was actually the brainchild of the former director, Manuel Borja Viey, who invited me in the middle of COVID to work on what turned out to be the largest retrospective, I think, of Shahn ever, certainly the largest in Europe. And the reasons for the show, or I should say the how should I say, the questions that came up for me when I was invited got me to really think about why Shahn, why now, why Spain. As many of you know, the Reina Sofia is the home of Picasso's Guernica, or Guernica, as we say in the US. And that museum, the Reina Sofia, really, in many ways, stands for the new Spain, sort of growing out of Franco's dictatorship into a democracy. And so this painting at the core of their collection really, I think, has given them a mission in the last several decades to really highlight the international art of resistance, given Picasso's anti-fascist, anti-Franco statement, anti-war statement. So in that sense, Shahn fit perfectly in this museum, and it was an unexpected blockbuster. Audiences really did see the contemporary relevance of Shahn at a time when right-wing forces are on the rise in democracies across the globe, including Spain. The show was not supposed to travel, but the Jewish Museum, when they were learning more about the show and how it was being received, they really thought that it should be shown in New York and it should be shown to U.S. audiences, and that Shahn was really speaking to this moment. And so they saw a kind of urgency and negotiated with me and negotiated with the Reina Sofia to adapt the show, to bring it from 315 objects to 175, from 12,000 square feet to less than 6,000 square feet, but to keep the themes and to try to keep the intensity of the content. And it was, as John said, is the first retrospective, career-spanning retrospective of Ben Shahn in the United States in nearly 50 years. So I was going to, if you'll allow me to, if you'll indulge me in this, I was going to show just very brief
Yeah,
overview of the show before we get to the New Deal section. So
bring it
this
on.
is the entrance. This is the entrance to the Jewish Museum show, and I realize some of you may not get to see the show, so you might appreciate these installation views. In terms of the entrance, you can see we open with the most famous work by Ben Shahn of 1931-32, The Passion of Sacco and Vanzetti. If anyone knows anything about Ben Shahn, you'll know this work from the Whitney Museum. The show had several goals. One goal was to illuminate the social justice work of Shahn across his career, as well as to speak to the vast array of media that conveyed that social justice, those social justice themes, from paintings to photographs to prints and posters to commercial work. And the work spans from the Great Depression through the Vietnam War. So it was a way of highlighting his social justice work, speaking to its contemporary relevance. It's urgent timeliness.
Oh yeah.
And I cannot overestimate or overemphasize just how relevant the work is and that people are responding to that relevance. The second goal is to reappraise Shawn's complexity, really the layered complexity of his art. Not only the vast array of media that I said that he worked in, but also his engagement with mass media, with photography, his own photography as well as others, with the repurposing of images for different contexts and different uses. Shahn had a great capacity to see the iconic aspect of an image and its capacity to be, or its the possibilities of it for various meanings and contexts, the integration of text and image in his work, and his experimentation with conceptual strategies like art within art, or modernist strategies, as well as incorporating abstraction and other avant-garde art forms into his work. So the working process is very key to the show, and it's displayed in display cases and on the wall in a contextual way in order to really show that if the social messages of Shahn are strong, it's because the art is strong. So the art is really driving the message and is driving the work. So now I'll just very quickly tell you that the show is called On Nonconformity, which comes out of an essay that Shahn wrote in the 1950s. Yes, which comes out of an essay that he wrote in the 1950s, published in The Shape of Content. And it really comes out of the repression, really the political repressions of the McCarthy era in many ways. His credo that the artist had to be a nonconformist and speak his truth, no matter how unfashionable. And then in terms of the sections of the show, we go from art and activism. There are 7 themes in this show. There were 12 in Spain. We collapsed them into 7. The show is loosely chronological, but also deeply thematic and contextual. So the first section is art and activism. The second section is the New Deal and the Great Depression, which we will be focusing on. The labor movement, particularly the industrial labor movement. You can see at the end of that wall, on the gray wall at the left, we open up with war, and these are some of Shawn's anti-Nazi posters. And then we turn the corner to the war and its aftermath, World War II. And then we go into the Age of Anxiety and the Cold War, which grapples with both the Red Scare and the repressions of McCarthyism, as well as as well as the atomic age. Might be missing an image there. And then we move into civil rights, the struggle for civil rights. Oh, and then a second image dealing with the civil rights movement, both the domestic struggle as well as the international anti-colonial struggle for freedom. And then the last section of the show goes into spirituality and identity, which is a work which really features works that I think are often misunderstood, and we really try to show that social conscience sort of laced throughout the work, even the spiritual work towards the end of his life, which, by the way, was made at the same time as his civil rights work. So they really are of a piece. And I think that's probably, yeah, I think that's the end, John. So now we have the New
Yeah,
Deal
and so
section.
yeah, just this is a
Yeah.
nice sort of, teaser because it gives us a sense of just how many different media Shahn was so conversant in. And so turning to the New Deal, right? Given that he's this multimedia virtuoso, talk us through his connections to the New Deal. How did he get started? What came first?
Right. Well, this is the New Deal section. There's this room and then a parallel room facing it, a mirror room on the other side. So there's two rooms, and I will be showing you both sides of the room. In the New Deal section, we open up with some of the political work that Shahn was
Mm,
doing before working for the government. So before joining the New Deal programs, you'll see street photographs of New York. You do see the New Deal posters at the right, but if you focus on the photographs straight ahead and then display case with the way in which those New York photographs were shown and were reflective of some of his politicization. So, for example, Shahn is picking up the camera in the early 30s, responding to the Great Depression, photographing the streets of New York, dealing with the rampant unemployment, and joining artists' unions, which, of course, the Artists' Union puts out the Art Front magazine, artists grappling with the rise of fascism as well. And Shahn is an early editor, designer, and contributor to Art Front. And at this moment, when he's picking up the camera, it's also becoming a really important tool of activism, a kind of the camera as witness, as documentary reportage, right? It's a sketch pad for him, capturing images that he's going to be using for future artwork, but it's also engaging him in a very deep way in the political scene on the left at the time. So this is sort of
yeah,
his first kind of foray into radical
yeah.
politics, I guess you can say. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you not super familiar with the New Deals, what happens is that once the government's hiring all these artists, they all share the same employer, and so now they can unionize. So before Shahn, is this right? So before Shahn's actually doing work for the New
Yes.
Deal, he's involved with the union and working on Art Front,
Right.
which is the artists' union. All these government employees now, right? This is their union,
Right.
and they're producing all these articles and
Well,
periodicals.
I'm glad you said that. And also, what are they advocating for? They're advocating for government support of the arts.
Yeah,
That's part of their cause. Exactly. Exactly. They can't use their art to pay the rent, right? And they often have these great posters that say we can't eat it, so exactly. So this sort of shows the early politicization of Shahn. He's also engaged in Diego circles with Diego Rivera, and he's
oh yeah,
invited to be one of Diego Rivera's assistants on the Rockefeller Center mural. And when that mural is destroyed, Shahn leads the protests really
yeah,
about the censorship. So this kind of gets into again this introduces the political scene, but as you say, also the New Deal section. And this is the other side, the mirror of the other room, that's the other side of the same room of the New Deal, which shows that government photographs right ahead, display cases, and then the paintings that are based on those photographs. So I can also show you here you asked how he got interested, involved in the New Deal. So we talked about the work right before the New Deal projects, and now we're talking about the work that Shahn does when he enters the New Deal projects.
so
So
the
like
posters are
right.
the first thing he's doing. Is that right for the?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So there
okay,
is actually yes and no. Actually, the posters and the photographs are actually being done simultaneously.
okay.
And so it's a little bit hard to explain it, but I'll do my best. So Shahn is originally hired by the Special Skills Division of the Resettlement Administration. So he's not hired originally as a photographer. He's hired as a graphic artist to make posters like this to speak to the Dust Bowl and to speak to what the government is doing to help farmers through the crisis. So these are the kinds of posters that he's doing, but they're based on photographs that he
Right.
also takes for the government. He is sort of sent uh, into the Deep South. He's sent to the Midwest for the Special Skills Division to basically get a sense of the kind of work that they're doing and the people in the communities that they're going to be working with. And then the photographs are so good and so strong that they're kind of they put him in touch with the historical section of the Resettlement Administration run by Roy Stryker, the photographic division, and then Shawn's work becomes part of that division. And then he becomes and he really sort of is at the forefront in many ways of the historical section project. So that's kind of how it happens. They're sort of happening simultaneously. And excuse me, and then he gets hired by the Farm Security Administration as well. He's totally immersed in the mission of these government projects, in the photography, in the graphic works, in the murals, which we're going to talk about. And he said in a later interview with Richard Dowd in the 1960s that he felt in total harmony with the times. He was completely on fire artistically at this time, using photographs, paintings, magazines, newspapers, posters, every medium at his disposal to respond to both the economic depression as well as the farm crisis.
And just
so
for
then
big
you
picture,
asked
the
the photographs.
so I was
Yeah,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
just for big picture, the Resettlement Administration kind of precedes the Farm Security Administration, or FSA, which many people are maybe more familiar with, and the photographs that are, documenting the Dust Bowl migration of people, the conditions of the Depression. So Dorothy Lang, right, as we've talked about in other contexts, right, tends to be the person people single out, but certainly Shahn is right there as well and producing, again, things in multiple media. Anyway, so yeah, let's talk about the photographs like that he's
Thank
making
you.
for the
Thank you, John. I'm
FSA.
glad
Yeah,
you mentioned Dorothea Lange, because
I know it's
Dorothea
a bone you
Lange
like to pick, right? So,
Dorothea Lange and Walker Evans are better known to most people, but Shahn was at the forefront of this project, and they were working simultaneously. And interesting factoid, Ben Shahn was living with Walker Evans in the early 30s. They shared a studio together in Greenwich Village as poor, starving artists. He learned some lessons from Evans, but Shahn was essentially self-taught using the small Leica, 35 millimeter Leica. So yeah, so Shahn was at the forefront. Lang Evans get promoted more by the art industry, and we can sort of talk more about why that is. But yes, let's get into the photographs. So he winds up taking about 6,000 photographs for the government. And I'm going to show you just 3 of them here. And in the exhibition, I really wanted to display a range of Shahn's photographs when he's working for the government, documenting the people who are hardest hit by the Depression, the sharecroppers, as you see here from Boone County, Arkansas, the Dust Bowl, the drought, people at home, people at work, people at leisure. He contributed greatly to the creation of what we now call a classic humanist documentary style, as you can see here. And he also contributed greatly to a kind of indirect critique, I guess you could say, of racial inequities in the Jim Crow South in this photograph of cotton pickers, children dragging bags of cotton that by the end of the day are be many times the weight of their own body. Shahn really knew,
yeah.
It's an extraordinary image. Shahn really knew how to focus an image on an object that was going to really speak volumes, on an aspect of the picture that was going to speak volumes. And then even photographed striking workers in this photograph of 1937 in Warren, Ohio. Interestingly, well, this was part of a very violent strike. Shahn didn't photograph the most violent part of it, the little steel strike of 1937, but he held these back from donating them to the government. And I find that quite interesting that he didn't think they would be useful for the goals of, persuading Congress to fund these relief programs, right? And striking workers perhaps would be a little too edgy, a little too difficult, really, for these pictures to be used. So I think that's interesting. We wanted to show an array of his photographs, which really speak to not only the complexity of Shahn's work, but in many ways the complexity of the project at large. And the other thing I think is really important, and I'll go back to this image here, is that I really wanted to show the significance of photography to Shahn's artistic and social vision. I wanted to show photos as art, even though he didn't necessarily promote them as art. I wanted to show them as documents. I wanted to show them as source and inspiration. I wanted to show them as mass media communication. So you see photographs and their related paintings. You see photographs. You see how they're you see the books in the display cases, and which shows how they circulated. So I really wanted you to see photographs on multiple levels. And that was one of the things we really tried to achieve in the show. And in instances like this, Scotts Run, West Virginia, with one of the photographic sources by Shahn of striking workers in West Virginia at the right, these were not placed next to each other on the wall. The photograph was placed in a display case nearby, close enough for visitors to make the connections themselves, but to really avoid sort of didactic relationships, one-to-one relationships, because the truth is Shahn probably worked from 4 different photographs to make this painting, sort of montaging elements from different photographs. So it's a very complex working process, and we didn't want to overly simplify it, nor did we want people to make sort of unfair comparisons between paintings and photographs, but rather to see them kind of on their own, but also to see their interrelationships. So this is one of the challenges of trying to do this in an exhibition. Right.
Yeah, because they're
And in
striking
this,
in they're striking
right.
in their own right, but you can also think of them as
Yes.
sort of being like studies, right, for some of the later
Yes.
paintings and murals that emerge. So real quick,
Exactly. And
one more thing.
right.
Sorry,
You got,
if
go
you're
ahead.
joining us late, sorry, real quick, there are some gray boxes on screen you might be seeing, and it's a technical glitch we haven't solved, so don't adjust your computer.
Apologize.
Anyway, sorry, Laura, please
That's okay.
continue.
And I wanted to say also that he started building the photographs. These photographs meant so much to him. He really believed he was doing good with these photographs and contributing to the
Yeah.
government archive. But he was also building his own archive that he was dipping into the rest of his life. Because for Shahn, photographs carried experiences and encounters with real people, with the devastation of poverty, the contradictions of individuals. These experiences never left him. And in many ways, the photographs gave a kind of authenticity from his perspective to
Yeah.
his paintings. In other words, I saw these people with my own eyes. It kind of gives an authenticity to the final work. So, and then I think,
Oh,
Shahn, that maybe
great.
lead
Yeah.
to your next
Yeah, no,
content
you
about
mentioned
the use of the images.
Yeah,
Right.
you mentioned that these things are circulating, and that's, we always often encounter these images sort of out of context. But of course, they're used to promote either to call attention to the crises that are happening in the country at the time, or to sort of try to generate further funding, right, for these different programs. So, yeah, if I could share maybe an example or two of how these images are being used by the government agencies.
Absolutely. The circulation of them was key. And here you see at the lower right is Archibald MacLeish's famous poem about the Great Depression, which was a book, The Land of the Free, in 1938, which used
Yeah.
many photographs from the FSA, including Shahn's, one of his photographs of a child of a Louisiana farmer at the right, as well as other photographs by FSA photographers. And at the upper left, you may recognize Family of Man. This is 20 years later, or almost 20 years later, 1955, one of the greatest most important photography shows in the Western world in the mid 20th century, curated by Edward Steichen at MoMA.
Yeah.
Shahn is shown at the left. He's given a lot of real estate in this book, even more than Dorothea Lange's image, which is shown much smaller at the right, which is, of course, a much more famous image in many ways. But it gives you the sense that Shahn was known, Shahn was respected as a photographer. Shahn's work circulated widely. He was an advisor to Roy Stryker. He designed brochures, he designed exhibitions. He understood both the possibilities and the limitations of these works. And his photographs, there's been actually quite a lot of research done recently on this. Cara Finnegan is a wonderful scholar who's done a lot of work on the circulation of FSA photography, and Mary Jane Appelis has been working on the circulation of the Farm Security Administration photographs, and she's uncovered some extraordinary things. And one of the things that she has discovered is that Shahn's photographs were among the most circulated of
Hmm.
the FRA FSA group. And that certainly
Interesting.
is something that we try to sort of bring out again in the installation. Why he stopped photographing is another story. We can talk about that in the Q&A. But these works really formed a foundation for him, again, that he drew on the rest of his life. 12 Million Black Voices by Richard Wright and Edwin Roscom, and the interior showing one of Shahn's great images from the cotton picking series. So, okay. So now we can.
Yeah, looking at time, we probably should move on to
Yeah.
murals
Yeah.
because he's doing them for multiple agencies. And oh, real quick, Roy Stryker, if you're wondering, he was head of the RA and the FSA. So if you're not, anyway. So yeah, let's talk about the murals that he's doing again for multiple agencies in the New Deal.
Yes, so as the show demonstrates, Shahn was deeply engaged in the government projects as a graphic artist, making posters, as a photographer, as a designer, as brochure designer, exhibition designer, and advisor. And he is commissioned to do murals from several agencies. Murals are obviously a great challenge to show in an exhibition. In
Yeah.
Spain, we chose to show big wall blow-ups of his Social Security mural because we had space. And so we were able to give a sense of the scale and size. Some curators choose to do projections or photographs. We decided to do studies, both in Spain, in addition to the wall blow-ups, and in the Jewish Museum installation, space was more limited, so we reserved it to studies. So I'm just showing you three studies at the left. The
Mm.
central work is a study, and the one to the right is a study. And then we get into some of the industrial labor posters at the right. But so I'm going to focus on Shahn as a muralist for the government, working for both the Resettlement Administration as well as the Treasury section of Fine Arts. And um, these are studies, as I said, studies at the left and a major study in the center, which was kind of a discovery. Well, it was a
Yeah.
discovery really for this
Very
show.
cool. Yeah.
Didn't know about it until we started doing research for the New York version of the show. John, should we skip to the Social Security mural now? We're probably
Yeah, I think so. And just real, yeah.
okay.
So,
Okay.
the process
Yeah.
for these mural competitions is the
Yeah.
artists have to submit multiple sketches and get approval. And so, which is nice that
Right.
we have them and kind of show them in exhibitions like this, since the actual murals themselves are in situ. So anyway, so yeah, let's talk
Exactly.
about.
So you can show studies. So we're going to focus on this mural study, which is at the center of the wall there, that green wall.
Yeah,
And this is called Harvesting Wheat. And this is
look at
relates
him.
to Shahn's, yes, a very confident farmer,
Very
a content
sassy.
farmer.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And this is from the Social Security mural, arguably his most prestigious, and Shahn said at various times, one of his most important murals or one of his best murals,
Yeah. His best. Yeah.
1940. Yeah, 1940, 42, the meaning of Social Security in what was the Social Security building, what is today the Health and Human Services building. And Shahn won from a competition, as John was saying, of 275 artists. So it was a very competitive and prestigious mural from the section of Fine Arts. And the theme of the mural, so I'll come back to this sort of quote discovery in a minute, but the theme of the mural was the meaning of Social Security. And Shahn had two main corridors that he had to fill. It was the biggest of the biggest space for the muralists who were selected. Philip Guston was another winner, as well as Seymour Fogel. Shahn got the largest space. This shows one side of the mural shows the ills of society that Social Security was supposed to ameliorate. So we have a scene of unemployment, for example, here, and then on the other side shows the sort of those who were to benefit from Social Security. So we have more uplifting images of workers being put back to work during Roosevelt's public works programs, and then the mural or the study that I quote discovered in a gallery in New York is related to this panel here that you see at the
There he
right.
is.
There
Yeah.
he is, harvesting wheat at the right. So it shows a farmer with an abundant crop and plenty of wheat and quite content. And you can see how, on the one hand, this speaks to what a lot of these murals were intended to do, to kind of boost morale, to be hopeful and uplifting, right, in these government buildings and these post offices, especially at a time when farmers were struggling. Right, farmers had been struggling for so long in this decade, and now we see a happy farmer with an abundant crop and plenty of wheat. So we can certainly see the uplifting quality. On the other hand, and this is the point that I make in the show, and I'd like to make here, is that Shahn also always found a way to insert his social critique or his commentary. He's able to get on board with the program, but he's also needs to to insert his critique. In this case, and I make an argument that his subversive critique here is that farmers were not covered under the Social Security Act.
Right.
And so he has an entire panel devoted to farmers as part of the uplifting part of those who benefit from Social Security. So I often see this as a way of critiquing some of the problems or limitations of the Social Security Act, that some of which got amended with amendments later. And we also know that domestic workers were
Yeah,
not covered by the Social
exactly.
Security Act. And I argue that Shahn includes a domestic worker here, this woman who looks a very different ethnicity than the child that she is caring for here,
Yeah, yeah.
in this panel dealing with the scenes of some of the problems in society, in this case, or at least the ills of, or at least some of the how should I say it, the issues in society that Social Security was supposed to help assist with, whether it be the elderly or those who were infirmed, or single mothers, or those who lost their fathers in war or in some other situation, orphans, that kind of thing. So anyway, so I think it's very interesting that Shahn does include those who were excluded from the Social Security Act. So, and maybe this is sort of parallel to his photographing striking workers and realizing that those works were not necessarily in line with the goals of the government, right? But he still felt it was important to document that. So I think Shahn is a very interesting figure in that way, in the way that he was able to navigate the needs of government, and his own need for critique. And so that might be a good place to, uh, you know, to end the Social Security mural, as far as
Yeah,
the
sounds good.
the content of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so as Mary mentioned at the outset of the talk, these are in the William J. Cohen building, which has been slated for what's called accelerated disposition. And so they're true frescoes, so they're like part of the wall. You can't move them without tremendous expense. And so we should have some time to kind of talk about that if people have questions, but this might be a good time for us to kind of maybe reach out if you all have questions for Dr. Katzman about the exhibition, which again, it's running in New York until October 26th. You're just seeing a tiny fraction of the show, so get up there, go see it, to see the range of things, how versatile that Shahn really was, and effective in so many different media. But yeah, as part of the Q&A, we can also be talking about some of the threats and challenges to these particular meaning of Social Security murals. So how are we? Are we getting any? Oh, there's a few that are
Any
coming in
questions, John?
already. Yeah.
Okay.
One of them I'm getting is that to talk about Shahn's life and how this may have influenced his politics. What does
Mhm.
being Jewish have to do with his choice of subjects in his
Mhm.
photographs and in his other works? Really great question. Thank you,
Yeah.
Susan Ives.
Oh, thank you. About his life, yeah. I like to say that the seed for social activism in Shahn's life was planted by his father. He grew up in what was Russian-controlled Lithuania for the first 8 years of his life. His father was an anti-Tsarist activist who was imprisoned in Siberia, sent to the Gulag because of his activism. He escapes to South Africa and makes his way to the United States, and the family immigrates in 1906. And he grows up in very poor immigrant neighborhoods in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So I think, as far as his life influences, I would say his father, who was a socialist and an activist, and he saw that as a young child, as his father spoke out against the oppressive conditions of the Tsar, particularly for Jewish people at that time, and the threats of pogroms, I think was a huge influence on him and his life. So, and then the other part of the question from Susan was about his Judaism. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, the Judaism is very much tied up with his social activism. And uh, Shahn was raised and nurtured in sort of working class pro-labor communities, growing up in New York, and Yiddish speaking working class communities. As I said, workers who were very engaged in unionizing. And there's a work in the show called East Side Soapbox. I should have brought it in, of a labor leader who is mobilizing Eastern European Jewish workers, and there's a sign in Yiddish in the picture that says something like the all workers have an appetite. The boss stole the key. And so it's a work from 1936, and it really tells us a lot, right? Because Shahn is letting us know that Yiddish was his first language, and he is connecting the Yiddish language, which was again his native language or his first language, with activists and with socialistically oriented workers who are unionizing. So social justice and his sort of working class Yiddish background, I think, are all of a piece, and that really, I believe, is sort of laced throughout the rest of his life. You'll see in the New Deal work, you'll see in the labor work, large percentage of labor membership and union organizers were Jewish in the 1940s. So Shahn is very much a part of that movement. He does a lot of anti-Nazi work in the Office of War Information. And then I'd say he really returns to his sort of Jewish identity in a big way in the 50s and 60s, when he sort of re-engages with Hebrew text, Hebrew language, and even Jewish mysticism, which is quite important to him. But again, always with a strain of social conscience sort of threaded throughout. So really the two are of a piece, the Judaism and the social activism. That is really the tradition of Judaism that he connects with is one deeply engaged in social activism. And of course, he supported the efforts of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, as did many Jewish activists. So he was a part of that as well.
We are getting flooded with amazing questions, and I don't think we can get to all of them. So I'm sorry. I'm just I've seen some good ones I want to cover later, but we're getting a question about how gender is represented in the murals, and there's a reference here to Barbara Milosh's great work on gender, and the comradely ideal. And so, the question is, do you see Shahn as being critical of the conventional gender roles that are often figured in these New Deal projects?
Yes and no. I would say often no. I would say that Shahn was at the forefront of racial equality, was at the forefront of understanding class issues in America and globally. And I would say that gender was not something that was as prevalent an issue for him, despite the fact that he was surrounded by powerful, independent feminist women, including his first wife and second wife, Tilly Goldstein and Bernarda Bryson, who were quite independent and had careers.
And to add real quick, there's a follow-up question about his working
Mm-hmm.
relationship with his wife. So if you want to
we'll come back to
tag
that
that
as well.
on.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, good. So it is, and his dealer, Edith Halpert, powerful female gallerist in the 1930s. And Dorothea Lange, Shahn looked up to Dorothea Lange. She was both a colleague, but also someone he greatly admired. There were art critics like Betty Chamberlain. There were curators like Mildred Constantine at MoMA, extraordinary art directors like Sippi Pinellas, who started many art magazines as an art director. He was an art director. He had great respect for all of these women, and talked about how important they were in some instances, and yet they don't really factor into his work. Sort of Rosie the Riveter never factors into Shahn's work, and we see women in more traditional roles as mothers, as wives, as comrades, according to Barbara Milosh's work, as sort of perhaps equal, but in their own sphere of identity as mothers or wives. And I would say the places where you see Shahn perhaps more progressive on the issue of gender is in his photographs. And you see really extraordinary images of particularly Black women picking cotton. You see many, very strong images of women in his photographs, and then you see in his artist protest photographs also women activists are marching alongside men in a very equal way. So there are certain instances where you do see that acknowledgement, and in others you don't. And so the murals, I would say, they seem to align with a lot of Barbara Mellish's discoveries
Yeah.
in her research. Yeah.
And they are more public facing, so it sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
Question from Deborah Gardner. These are really great questions. So she wants to know, and you're the person to ask, if there was a friendship between Shahn and Arthur Rothstein.
Oh, yes,
Given,
yes.
yeah,
And
real quick, because she's sort of mentioning the kinds of
yeah,
photographs that Rothstein's
yeah.
doing of Black
Mhm,
workers, and then
mhm.
an example being
Yes,
the stuff in Gee's Bend. So
yes.
I know you can talk to that. So
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yes, Shahn was friends with Arthur Rothstein. Obviously, they were on the project together because Rothstein was one of the early photographers on the project, on the Resettlement Administration, Farm Security Administration project. And I do think he appreciated Rothstein for his technical knowledge, because Shahn was quite cavalier about his technical knowledge in photography. But Rothstein was very, very knowledgeable about all kinds of
yeah,
techniques and use of flashes and different cameras and stuff. So I do think he respected Rothstein on that level. I don't think they were as close friends as, say, he was with Dorothea Lange or Walker Evans, but he certainly respected him on the project, and their work is very much aligned, I think. Yeah, I mean, he went on to become a Life magazine photographer, really more of a photojournalist. And Rothstein stayed a photographer his whole life. Shahn did not. So, yeah.
there are a couple different questions that
Mhm.
are touching on this issue that we looked at briefly about sort of why Shahn has not had the kind of notoriety today that not
Mhm.
fame and acclaim that folks like Lang do, and if this had to do
Mhm.
with his background or his political leanings is kind of one of the questions for that. So
Yeah, it's a really tough one to answer. The first thing
yeah,
that comes to mind is, well, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is that I do think that there is a photo industry and an art world industry behind Evans' work and Lang's work that has
sure,
promoted them
yeah,
through books, through exhibitions. And I'm not saying that their work is not extraordinary. I think their work is
yeah, yeah,
absolutely extraordinary. But I do find it ironic that Walker Evans is often thought of as the sort of central documentary photographer, along with Lang for the FSA, when he was there for a nanosecond,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he didn't even get along with, with the project, and kind of poo-pooed many of its goals, so I think that, or could be somewhat, what's the word? Could be somewhat dismissive, let's put it that way. Whereas Shahn was deeply, deeply involved in the goals, of these projects. And again, this is not to diminish Walker Evans at all. I think he's an extraordinary photographer and certainly deserves the attention he's gotten. But I do think that there is a kind of industry, behind the collecting and the exhibits and the books that get produced. And so I think Shahn hasn't quite entered that sort of industry. Although 20 plus years ago, my colleagues and I at Harvard did do a book on Ben Shahn's New York, the photography of modern times. And we definitely tried to really put him on the map as a photographer again. And then I think the other aspect of Shahn as a photographer is his own self. I don't know if it's self mythologizing or his own self crafting of his career. He was deeply engaged in photography in the 30s. It was incredibly important for him.
yeah,
But by the time of his, say, Museum of Modern Art retrospective in 1947, he really downplayed his
yeah,
photography.
yeah,
And part of that had to do with the fact that I don't think he was interested in the world knowing that most of his work was based on photographs. And there was just a lot of prejudice against artists working from photographs for a very long time. Somehow they were cheating, somehow they didn't have imagination, somehow they were taking a shortcut, and also photography wasn't seen as a high art for a very long time in museums,
right, right.
right? So there was, I think, his own desire to sort of play up his painting and downplay his photography. So there's his own actions and his own agency within
Yeah.
that as well.
And that's it's the area of the dominance of the abstract expressionism in the New York school. So making photography even more sort of retrograde in the eyes of all the tastemakers in New York at the time. Again, I'm sorry we can't get to all these really amazing questions. I do want to make sure we have time. Thanks again for attending, Laura, for sharing your
Thank you.
very
Thank
small
you.
fraction of the show, and everyone out there for wonderful questions we just couldn't get to.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Will we be able to uh, copy those questions from the chat?
Yeah,
Okay, excellent. We can preserve. And
20,
thank you.
27 questions.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much. I wanted to take a moment to thank John and Laura and everyone in attendance and our donors who so generously support this type of programming. If you have more to say to us, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear from you and connect you with our speakers, and also to think about if you're working on advocacy or you're interested in it, to connect with us. Please do, if you're in the Bay Area in Northern California, and if you're interested in folk music, please do consider coming to Mill Valley on October 19th for this wonderful concert. And stay tuned for new webinars. We have one coming up in early December featuring John Murphy and his new survey book of New Deal art. So look out for announcements about that. We love having you. And there it is. John Ott is John Murphy's book. So we're going to have a talk coming up about that. Thank you so much, Laura. Get to the show in New York if you can. Take care, everyone. Take care, everyone. And thank you so much. We'll see you next time.